Don't know if I delayed it long enough and if you got to hear this intro, but I'm here. My name is Spencer. I'm the host of Constructive Criticism, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michael.
How's it going, guys? I mean, they either got to just, stare and wonder what was happening for a few seconds, or it was right on time. So either way, I'd say things are working out.
Yeah. I mean, according to my Twitch, we're still not online. So, I don't know.
I mean, there should be like a 15-second delay, so
Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening, or if what goes on.
I mean,
but
fortunately, those are pretty easy words to say. So if it's not working, we can get that squared away.
We can easily start over.
It's not a one-time thing. Yeah.
What I'm really worried about is the fact that my Twitch isn't working, because if that's the case, there's a surefire chance that my Comcast is going to crap out on me this week.
I mean, you make it sound like that just wasn't going to happen anyways. So
that's a fair point, Michael. That is a fair point. Well, you know who won't crap out on you, and that's our newest sponsor. You can check them out at the Mana Base. The Mana Base is a great place to check out new Magic content. They have all kinds of Magic content, including Nikachu, one of the great modern Merfolk players of our generation. He just recently top 8'd a GP recently. And you can check out his YouTube content there at the Mana Base, as well as our content every week. You can check out Constructive Criticism and Limited Time Only, 2 podcasts about getting better at Magic together, including this one. So check them out check out the Mana Base. They are a great place to find Magic the Gathering content. You can also check out their sponsor, which has sealed product, something that Oasis Games doesn't offer. So if you go there, you can Fusion Gaming, the store that sponsors that website, has sealed product, which is something that we've wanted to get on the show for a while. So if you go to the Mana Base, you can go to their sponsor and get that sealed product, which would be pretty friggin' sweet. So go ahead and check them out. Let's move on to our Patreon shout out. So every week on the show, we want to give a shout out to the newest patrons of the show. This week we have James. We have our returning patron of Chad who came back. Welcome back, Chad. And we have John. So thank you to all of you. It means the world to us every time we get that little notification letting us know that somebody has joined the Patreon. It really does brighten my day. It's probably
cool. It's cool, right?
Yeah, it's one of the best parts of my day. So thank you so much to each and every one of you. It really does mean the world to me. One of the benefits of being a patron is you get to submit a question for the Patreon participation segment. And this week we have a pretty great one. So Michael, why don't you go ahead and read this question for us?
All right. Spencer and Michael, thank you for the great content and the best intro song among all MTG podcasts. I have a question regarding what deck to play in Legacy. I got back to Magic during Eldritch Moon. I used to play Kitchen Table Magic and started playing Legacy early this year. I enjoy the fact that Legacy won't change as quickly as other formats, which should allow me time to master a deck despite not being a grinder. I was halfway through assembling Miracles and was forced to move to a new deck when Top got banned. I decided to build a mono black Pox deck and I'm having a blast. I'm even considering upgrading my current list by adding Chains of Mephistopheles, the Abyss, Nether Void, and potentially Splashing White for Enlightened Tutor. In parallel, I'm putting together a lands deck and noticed that a few Miracles builds are putting up some good results on Magic the Gathering Online. The ones with Portent and Snapcasters, that kind of stuff. Considering the 3 deck options above, which one should I focus on and try to master? I would like to be competitive at my LGS level and would like to participate in an SCG event in the second semester while feeling that I have a shot for day 2. Your input will really help me prioritize which cards I should be buying with my Magic the Gathering allowance.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think this is something that a lot of people in a lot of situations wonder about. Where should they prioritize what they buy and things like that. If you're trying to be competitive, I think there's a clear answer to this one. I would start in the blue-white control world. I think that deck did not lose a lot, is still quite viable, and if you already have a lot of it, I would continue on that path as it's still a really competitive deck.
I agree with that. He also notes that he's only missing dual lands. So Tundra is not necessarily a great one to own, but you could probably get away with just 2. And you could get, I think you can get moderate play Tundras around 140, something like that. So they're really not that bad. If that's all you're missing, I think that Pox is just not a very competitive deck.
It's very fun, but if your goal is to do well at an SEG, it's probably not the deck that I would start with.
Yeah, so blue-white is basically the new adaptation of Miracles. They're using they're playing 16 cantrips now. So you don't get to play top anymore. You also don't get to play Counterbalance, but they're playing Ponder, Brainstorm, Predict, and Portent in combination to dig through the deck really quickly. I think the deck is totally reasonable. It's put up some decent results on Magic Online. Let's put it this way: it's put up more results on Magic Online in the last 2 weeks than Pox has in the last 2 years. So, regardless of whether or not the deck is like a tier 1 deck, I think that's unclear at this point. We just haven't had any big legacy events. The fact that you're so close to finishing it makes that, to me, the easy choice. From there, you'll have some time to like play that for a while, kind of see how it works for you. If you like it, how competitive it is, things will get fleshed out a little bit more. But if all you're missing is a couple of Tundras, I think that's the clear choice by so much.
And not only that, but like you can use your winnings in Legacy with that deck to go and complete that Pox deck that you have fun with, and that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like if your Magic the Gathering allowance is allowing you to buy, Chains of Mephistopheles, the Abyss, and Nether Void, it's clear to me that this is something you're willing to put some of your money into.
Right.
And if you build a deck that doesn't take as much of this up front, because I'm assuming that 2 Tundras is going to be cheaper than all that stuff, it'll allow you to then save some of that over time. And if you decide you wanted to build like Bant Deathblade, those Tundras could go in there. If you wanted to build,
right, I was thinking of like Jeskai and Bant and things like that.
Yeah, I think, and even if you can't use the Tundras, you might be able to trade them for some. Like, there are a lot of options, and I feel like building this deck allows you to both play the most competitive deck now and spend the least money up front, and that feels like the winning combination to me.
Yep, completely agree. Let's move on to our next segment, which is hashtag always improving. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. This is brought to you by Oasis Games, who is always trying to do what it can to try and improve. So you can check them out at oasisgamesslc.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. And that's a huge chunk of change, especially for people who are going to these modern and legacy GPs coming up in Las Vegas. Huge portion of you might have to buy a deck. Check out Oasis Games to try and buy that deck. So, and if you haven't already shopped there, you can use the code Would That Be Good for 4% off every order. And I think that would be good. It brings Oasis Games to a price that's really hard to beat. So,
absolutely.
They are the place that I buy all of my Magic the Gathering cards. I actually just sold every Magic the Gathering card I own to Oasis Games this week. So it was pretty good. It felt really good. I told my wife how much I got. She's like, "You owned that much in Magic the Gathering cards?" I was like, I won a lot in early 2016, and I transferred that into more Magic cards. So
yeah, I think you made a critical mistake there.
No,
there's one.
Here's the thing: is that and this is something I should do a video on this. So I actually treat my Magic the Gathering collection as a savings account. So I see it as something that's very easy to invest in, that I get to play with and use, and I can recoup really easily and just sell off.
It's true. It does not. It is not the kind of thing that loses value through use generally, especially eternal formats.
Yeah. So I often will just sell off my collection to, and it's a pretty good savings account. I got a lot of money for my all standard cards recently, so it's a pretty good investment and something that I use basically as my savings account. When people are like, you don't have any money in savings, I'm like, well, I have like $2,000 in Magic the Gathering cards, so yeah, I have a savings account. So let's move on to our hashtag always improving segment. It really is kind of the point of the show. It's something that when we adopted this segment, it's become a lot of people's favorites. It's important to them to realize that if you aren't getting better, you're really getting worse. Like, Magic is just too hard to maintain by doing nothing. So being active in your own improvement is really important. So, Michael, I'm going to let you start this week. I'm interested to hear what your always improving segment is.
Well, I don't know. I like, in terms of what I actually did to get better at Magic this week, I tried my best to prepare for the RPTQ, but didn't feel especially great about it. I mean, I'm not the worst limited player. It's not like I'm abysmal, but I'm not an especially great limited player. So I put a little bit more of my time into trying to prepare for that, just building some practice pools. And then other than that, I mostly worked on finding stuff for GP Las Vegas so that if I didn't get there this weekend, I would feel good about my chances to, get there for silver. Not this weekend, but next weekend. but I was a little bit fortunate in the RPTQ. I opened a pretty good pool. My draft went well, was able to get there. So got that all locked up. And I don't know, I feel like there's a big weight off my shoulders. Like,
Yeah,
I've had,
congratulations.
yeah,
It's June. You've hit your goal for the year, man. You will be silver this year. We have a new silver pro on the podcast, and congratulations, man. Like, I could not be happier for you. I found it really interesting, and I'd love to know, like, you actively went on your way to ask me about what you should draft and how you should approach it going into the top eight. Um, I think that it's amazing to me that somebody who is significantly better at playing Magic than I am would be willing to come to me and ask me about a format that they don't feel comfortable in. And there is an amount of humility that comes with being good at Magic the Gathering and knowing I don't know what I don't know, and if I can get a little bit of an edge, how do I do that? And I know you shrug it off, but like it's impressive that like you're willing to come to another person to try and gain that edge going into that top 8 draft. And you drafted literally exactly what I told you to draft.
Yeah, no, I mean the deck I ended up with was pretty good. It needed a little bit to come together, but it kind of all came together in the last pack, and I was very happy with what I drafted. Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was like, because there was a person 2 seats away from you drafting like a similar deck, but they weren't like prioritizing the same things you were. So like they would take a card, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's so much better that they took that card than you, and like I got to watch the whole thing unfold. And it was fun to watch. It was like I knew that you were gonna get those cards that you needed as I was watching, and it was fun to watch. It was a thing of beauty.
It was a good feeling. I'm really happy.
I'm interested to ask, like, what causes you to be so humble and willing to like ask others for advice going into those situations?
I mean, think of it this way, right? Like, so Magic is a game with a lot of variance. So when you're losing and you're feeling bad about how you're doing, and you know you can win more than you are, that's nice, and I connect with that on some level. Like, everyone gets down on themselves, but you also know that like you put time into this and you try and you know what you're doing. So don't get too low when things are going bad. But that also means that when you're running a little above average and things are going well for you, it just because I managed to like build my sealed pool pretty well doesn't make me great at this limited format. And if I have the opportunity,
sealed pool was sweet.
It had some issues, but I think I was able to get to the best version of my deck that I could build, at least within a card or two.
Sure.
And understanding that I did one thing well, but that doesn't mean, oh, well, now I mastered it and everything's going to be easy from here on. Like, just there's still so much more to learn. And I know that like you have played a lot more of this limited format, thought about this limited format a lot more than I have. And just the opportunity to sort of say, hey, so like, what are you looking for specifically to like let you know that like a really aggressive archetype is open? Just sort of getting a little advice there just makes you feel more comfortable, and it ended up working out.
Cool. Well, congratulations, man. You have become like one of my best friends, and it's like really fun to watch you succeed at this, and I'm really happy for you. And like it's funny because like my wife didn't even question the fact that I was watching your top 8. Like it was a no-brainer to her that I would spend multiple hours like doing nothing, just watching you play Magic.
Yeah, I appreciated that. It was really nice to have you there, and it was really gratifying.
So I also played in the RPTU this weekend. So I knew opening my sealed pool that it was not good enough. It had really good commons and uncommons, like really good, like to the point where like my deck could, if I got lucky, win some matches of Magic. But I knew opening that pool, I was like, this is not good enough to get me to the Pro Tour. I'm gonna have to get lucky. Like I will not gear on the back of my sealed pool alone. And coming to that realization was gratifying. It meant that like I knew that I had to play good Magic. And honestly, it was I played good Magic. I was impressed at the amount of decisions that I had and how I was able to go through them. I got a little unlucky, and that's okay. Like, I still got to play good Magic and make good mulligan decisions. Unfortunately, some of those mulligans came at the wrong time. I lost a win in for top eight. At that point in the tournament, my only loss was Michael, who was going to be pretty highly seeded. In fact, if I had won my match, my win, and I think Michael and I probably both could have drawn into top eight.
Almost certainly, yeah. It's that's just sometimes sealed is like that. When you draw the best cards in your deck, it seems really easy, and when you draw the worst cards in your deck, it's just a really good deck seems bad.
I did draw the best cards in my deck against you. It just wasn't good enough.
Well, I drew my best ones too, right? I mean, that's always kind of the secret of limited, right? If you're good at drawing the best cards in your deck, even an okay pool can do really well. Yeah. And if you're not good at drawing them, you can have a great deck and flame out.
But I did think that I played well in my losses. I think I played well against you. I think I made good mulligan decisions in my other match that I lost. And, I got a little unlucky, but I think that it's important to note, like, part of the thing about PTQs and PPTQs is, like, you have to put yourself in the position to win. And I felt like I did that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a small sample, right? Like, it comes down to, like, I won a game 3 in what I thought was a win, and I ended up having to play the last round as well. But where it like I felt like I was unlucky to have to draw well to win, but I played well enough to give myself outs and managed to get lucky and kind of get there at the end.
Your last 2 rounds were super swingy.
Yeah.
Like, it was like Michael's 100% to win this game. Michael's 0% to win this game. Michael's 100% to win this game.
I think that was actually the most swingy game of Magic I ever played by far. We had, like, I was almost dead. Then I had Archfiend with Black Cartouche. Then she had Austere Command. Then I had creatures. Then she had creatures into Prepare to Fight. Then I had, like, Deem Worthy into another removal spell into a creature into one final removal spell. It was just insane.
It was crazy. So, I think that you and I both played some of our best Magic this weekend, and it's good. It's actually a good feeling, right? Like, while I didn't qualify for the Pro Tour at this event, knowing that I'm playing good Magic right now gives me a lot of confidence going into an event like GP Vegas, where I have multiple shots to qualify for the Pro Tour. It's a good feeling. Like, it's obviously going to be harder at GP Vegas, but knowing that I'm playing good Magic and making good decisions is pretty important.
Well, and that's all you can ever do. Right? Yeah. I mean, you can't force yourself to draw the cards you need at the time you need them. You can't force yourself not to mulligan. You play the best you can, and you hope that everything else sorts itself out.
I love what Chad is doing right now, by the way. This Chad is, like, going off. It's pretty great. No comments about the Austin Godels. I just want to say that Mason will not be at GP Vegas, and Austin will be. That's all I'm saying. So let's move on to our next segment. So our next segment is our Deck Doctor. So if you are a patron of $5 or more, you can become one of our Constructed Critics. If you are a Constructed Critic, you get early access to deck lists. You get access to our Facebook group for those special people. You get access to doing Deck Doctors, which means on the segment of the show, we'll actually go over your deck and talk about it. You get access to our limited prep, our Pro Tour prep, basically everything. Go to patreon.com, become a patron of $5 or more, and you too can get access to all of this. And it's a fun group. Like, I think everybody in that group is really dedicated to improving, just like our other Facebook group. It's just more kind of honed in. So
it's supportive, though. It's fun. We have a good time.
So let's go over this Deck Doctor. I was really excited about this Deck Doctor. It was we actually got 2 this week, so we'll do Paul's next week, and this week we're going to do the one that is pretty close to home for me, Michael, and a little bit close to you.
I know you love this deck.
You and I worked on this together, and let's talk about it really quick. Why don't you go ahead and read over the deck list that we have on the screen here?
Absolutely. So the creatures start with 4 Snapcaster Mage, 4 Death Shadow, 4 Tarmogoyf, and 4 Street Wraith. It has 4 artifacts, and those are 4 Mishra's Baubles. Has 21 instants and sorceries. Those are 4 Fatal Push, 4 Traverse the Ulvenwald, 4 Inquisition of Kozilek, 4 Thoughtseize, 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Stubborn Denial, 1 Maelstrom Pulse. Has 1 Planeswalker, which is Liliana of the Veil, and then 18 lands, including 12 fetch lands. Those fetch lands are Verdant Catacombs, Polluted Delta, and Misty Rainforest. Then 2 Overgrown Tombs, 1 Breeding Pool, 1 Watery Grave, 1 Swamp, and 1 Forest. The sideboard is 2 Fulminator Mages, 2 Nile Spellbombs, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Collective Brutality, 1 Ceremonious Rejection, 1 Stubborn Denial, 1 Abrupt Decay, 1 Liliana the Veil, and 1 Liliana the Last Hope.
So this list, I would just want to say that, first of all, I really like this archetype. There are some major key differences between what you're doing and what I would do in this deck. So one of them I just want to start off with is Maelstrom Pulse. So while I understand Maelstrom Pulse, I think that you are a deck that can really abuse some other stuff. And I think that you're missing a huge part of what makes Bug really powerful in a few different ways. So I'm actually going to read the deck list that I've been playing. I actually still play this deck sometimes, and this is a deck that Michael and I worked on together. So in our version, we have 4 Mistress Bauble, 4 Death Shadow, 3 Snapcaster, 4 Street Wraith, 4 Tarmogoyf, 1 Abrupt Decay, 3 Fatal Push, 1 Murderous Cut, 2 Stubborn Denial, 4 Thought Scour, 2 Liliana the Last Hope, 3 Inquisition, 4 Thoughtseize, 3 Traverse, and 18 lands. I'm sorry. So I want to talk about some of our key differences, because this is actually a deck that Michael and I worked on together, so we both have some insight into this. So early on, when we were talking about this deck, one of the key things that we really liked, and the thing that Michael Majors, so I just listened to their podcast today, they're also advocating, if you're not playing Grixis, to actually play Bug. They also think that the blue is the most important piece here, and one of the reasons is Stubborn Denial and Snapcaster Mage. But the other thing that I think is really great that they mentioned is Liliana the Last Hope is actually just significantly better in Bug than the other versions of the deck, because it lets you continue this Traverse package being a Tarmogoyf deck and like kind of really escalating that in a new awesome way.
Yeah, so that's really cool. The other cool thing is that because you're not delving, so like I think our list was playing 1 Murderous Cut, but that's not really significant compared to like 2 Gurmag Anglers and 2 Tassigurs like the Grixis lists are usually playing. Right. Your Liliana the Last Hopes and your Snapcaster Mages are both really freed up relative to Grixis. But one of the things that I don't like about this list is not playing any sort of cantrip really limits the ability of Snapcaster Mage to be a smoother. Like, you have to get to 3 mana kind of naturally anyways, and that makes it very expensive without cantrips to help you find lands. I think Thought Scour is interesting with both Tarmogoyf, Snapcaster Mage, and Liliana the Last Hope. To be fair, I actually really like Liliana the Veil right now. I think it's very good against the Grixis deck specifically. Yes. But I think I would just like more Planeswalkers in the main deck. I also think that I'm quite sure that 4 Snapcaster Mage is at least 1 and maybe 2 too many.
Yeah, I think it's definitely 1 too many. One of the things that Jerry was advocating that I agree with, it was so funny. As I was listening to their podcast, I'm like, you guys have come to all of the same conclusions that Michael and I have. One of them being that Michael and I, so we actually do have 2 Liliana the Last Veil in our sideboard. One of the reasons Jerry actually came to the exact same conclusion. He's like, I think you want at least 2 Liliana the Last Hope in the main, and you want some number of Liliana the Veil in the 75. Michael and I thought the exact same thing. The reason that we went over with Liliana the Last Hope in the main over Liliana the Veil is because of the synergies in the deck. While Liliana the Veil is very specifically powerful in specific matchups, you know, you want to decide like which one you want where you want it, and I think that first of all, I hope it's Lonnie, because that's how I'm going to say your name. I love the fact that like you're dedicated to this deck. I think it's super powerful. I think that, but I think that a few of your numbers are just a tiny bit off. And I think that what happens is, you know, this deck looks like, to me, it's like 4 4 4 4 4 4 4 a couple of 2-ofs, a couple of 1-ofs, and I think that like you can gain a lot of edge by trimming on some of those 1-ofs and finding analogs for them. So for example, we have 3 Fatal Push, 1 Murderous Cut, because that Murderous Cut, as long as we're including things like Thought Scour, is basically free to play. It's not going to hurt our Tarmogoyfs, and it's going to give us an answer in the mirror match that we don't typically have.
Yes, it's really nice to have a removal spell that actually answers Gurmag Angler. Matt and I have been trying some Jund lists lately, and my one concern with Bug in general is that it's not a very mana-efficient deck.
you're short basically one terminate because you can really only afford to play one Murderous Cut.
Right. Well, my issue with Bug in general is just you have a lot of sort of do nothings. Like you can struggle to catch up if you fall behind on the board, and I think that playing so many snapcasters and not enough unconditional removal just makes that tough. I think even in the early turns of the game, Murderous Cut is pretty powerful, and I think you really need the Liliana Last Hopes to be able to grind, because otherwise the versions with red are going to be really tough with Kolaghan's Command, or I mean the Grixis version specifically, Snap Kolaghan's Command, which is something they can get to eventually, as these mirror matches almost always go really long and grindy.
Yeah, completely agree. First of all, I want to say that I think that this, in my opinion, is the second best version of this deck, and I think that it gets advantages in places that Grixis won't. So it kind of just depends on like where you expect the meta to be. But I think that you are missing something by not playing Thought Scour.
So specifically, I really like Tarmogoyf better than Caster in Angler against Burn. Something that I really came to agree with each on, but he actually has to do that all their turn too, and it also allows you to sometimes. It also sometimes allows you to just let me know. It also sometimes allows you to fetch like basic swamp, basic forest, and go like Inquisition into Tarmogoyf. That's one of your best ways to win the burn matchup. So I really think you actually need 3 collective brutalities in the sideboard to make that matchup favorable. Yeah, but I think that the Tarmogoyfs really improve that matchup.
Do you have our old list memorized, by the way? Because that's literally the number that we came to.
I don't. But Matt and I have played a bunch with Jund this week, and we're mostly crushing burn almost exclusively with Swamp, Inquisition, Forest, Tarmogoyf. Deal with it.
Yeah, so the sideboard that Michael and I had come up with in the past was two Nihil Spellbomb, 1 Big Game Hunter, 1 Seal Primordial, 2 Threads of Disloyalty, 1 Dismember, 1 Dispel, 2 Stubborn Denial, 2 Liliana the Veil, 3 Collective Brutality. Go ahead.
And to be fair, this was a little while ago, so I'm not sure that I would advocate the exact same sideboard now as then. Threads of Disloyalty in particular is a lot better against Jund and Grixis. That's actually
the one that I was going to say is like the only card that I like look at in the sideboard comparatively is Threads of Disloyalty. I actually have updated the main deck since we last worked on this together. I think I changed the land base a little bit to make it easier to cast some of our spells. But Lonnie, what I'll do is I'll send you this list and then kind of just cross-examine, like find what works best for you. The only things that I would say here is like you're missing probably Murderous Cut and Thought Scour, and then I would advocate Liliana the Last Hope in the main over Liliana the Veil, but I would have Liliana the Veil in the 75.
Yeah, and I think the Maelstrom Pulse is better relegated to the sideboard as well. It's nice in matchups like Bant Eldrazi where you want to be able to kill like Thought-Knot Seer and maybe Rest in Peace or something like that. But in the main deck, I think it's a little bit clunky. And one of the ways that these decks often lose is the combination of trying to fetch shock and not being able to spend your mana as efficiently as you'd like.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
That's been my experience.
Yeah, this is a more interesting deck. By the way, really quick, because I just want to touch on this because Michael was lagging a little bit. One of the things that he said he really liked that might have gotten lost for you is actually the reason that he's liking Jund right now and why he might like Bug is because of the power of Tarmogoyf against decks like Burn and how it really helps you over cards like Gurmag Angler or Taciture. So first of all, I want to say thank you for this deck, Doctors. It's a deck that's kind of close to Michael and I and our testing team right now is we're trying to figure out which version of this deck we like, and we've worked on a lot of these different decks. So this was a fun one to do. So thank you so much for that, Deck Doctor. You can get one too by becoming a patron of $5 or more per month by going to patreon.com/ccmtg. You ready for our next segment, Michael?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go right into this. So our next segment is our card of the week. So this week I have Glory Bound Initiate as the card of the week. This is a kind of a 2-week celebration of the card, as it won a GP and top 8 at a modern GP the week before.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, isn't it? Like this card just doesn't look that good.
I think it's secretly just really good. I think that it just does enough of it that it's quite good enough, right? Like, do you understand? Does that make any sense? That just sounds like such
flexible. I know. I just do different things at different points in a game. It can do different things in different matchups, right?
Right. Yeah, completely agree.
Fairly good job of kind of filling a bunch of different roles.
Yep, completely agree. Completely agree. I think that one of the reasons that I would pick this as the card of the week is just like it is one of those cards that might be coming under the radar. Like people really liked it to begin with, but they weren't sure where it fits, and it looks like it's fitting into just different types of decks, right? You know, whether it's a tempo deck by being this like huge creature that you get to play early, or being this huge creature you play early in aggro, it just fits into multiple slots and something that we didn't expect to see. And you know, just yeah, like you know, it's done well in red white, it's done well in blue white, it's done well in Esper in modern. The card is just honestly just putting in a lot of work.
Yeah, it kind of fills that veteran motorist slot if you don't want to dip into red in the vehicles lists.
Oh yeah, I forgot there's also an
pretty
Esper
interesting.
Vehicles.
Yeah, so if you decide you don't want red, people are playing it in that veteran motorist slot because it's a 2-drop that crews heart. It gives you some lifelink here and there. It's just a card where I think like flexibility really does a lot for it.
Yeah, I think it just does enough of it that it really gets the nod from me. And so this week we want to give that out to one of our patrons. So we want to give that out to Michael Christopher. So Michael, if you'll shoot me a message on Facebook, we'll get that sent off to you. We really appreciate all of our patrons of $3 a month. And we're happy to. We have a big chunk of cards. I've been super busy. So if you have won a card of the week recently and haven't gotten it, I actually just haven't sent out a card of the week in I think 2 months. It's not because I don't want to. I just, being a new dad, it's been really busy. And we actually got some feedback anyway from multiple people who won card of the weeks who didn't want them. So we actually have an update on how we're going to do this. So Michael, we're actually going to send you a play set of Glorybound Initiate. And I kind of want to talk about like some of the feedback we've gotten about card of the week and what people actually want. So the idea of card of the week doing it on a weekly basis and giving it out every week was that we would do a couple of commons and uncommons and stuff like that and make it kind of randomized and things like that. But what people actually are saying that they want is like, yeah, I want a play set of whatever the card is, and I want it to be pretty good. So what we're going to do from this feedback is we're going to do a card of the month that's going to be like the card of the month, like the best card of the month, and talk about it and do a segment on it and give it a play set of that card to a Patreon. And then we're going to do a card of the week segment where every week we're going to talk about a card and like a card that did really well that week and still have it be a segment. But we're only going to give out card of the month.
And hopefully that'll allow us to just give you better cards.
Right, exactly.
Still focus on what we want to focus on week to week.
Yes.
But it kind of win-win for everyone. That's the hope.
Right. So people are like, I appreciate you giving me card of the week, but I really don't want this uncommon or this like 2-cent, this like 25-cent card. And it's like, well, okay, I understand that. Like, we can appreciate that. So we'll make the card of the month really great, something that you want a playset of, and make it worth something to you. And we'll give that out to those $3 or more patrons per month. In exchange for that, because we still want to give value to you guys, we're going to be offering Training Ground polls every single week. So every week, I'm going to post 3 to 4 training grounds that we're willing to do for that week. You get a vote on them, and we'll just do the show that you pick. This won't happen every week, as like we have episodes like this week was almost a Mega Rankings episode, and we do want to go back to those. The thing is like we've been kind of slacking on a few different things that we kind of want to change up. But like, so like weeks like Pro Tour weekend or set reviews, like you don't get a vote on those, but like we'll give you a list of training grounds and we want to hear what you guys want to hear. So $3 or more per month every single week, you'll get a vote on the show for the most part. And then card of the month, we'll give out a play set of a really great card. So thank you everybody who's been donating. Thank you for the feedback. That was interesting to know. Like I would not have known that you actually just don't want a play set of a really good uncommon. And you instead want a really, powerful card, and you want to place it of that instead. It makes sense. Like you want some value there. So thank you for that feedback, and we really appreciate it. let's move on to our training ground. So every week on the show, we want to talk about something that makes you better at Magic or life in general. And we got to this really fast. It feels like this show is really good. And I've been told that I'm skipping the power rankings.
Yeah, that would do it.
I'm like, where are the power rankings? Are they?
Yeah. So coming in 5th place this week, we have Esper Vehicles.
I'm so confused. How did I screw this up? Well, I don't know where my points are. Does anyone have a link? All right. So coming in 5th, I'm so sorry. I was like, man, it's only in 38 minutes.
Yeah, what's happening?
Yeah. Well, this is the fastest we've ever been. So we have Esper Vehicles. This is a new take, Michael.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about. Like, this is the list. This is Tamada's list. Yes?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so this is what Tamada won GP, which...
No. This is not Blue White Flash.
No, okay. So I'm confused.
This is a different deck.
Okay, so basically, this list is playing like Glory Bound Initiate. So it's basically playing Glory Bound Initiate over Veteran Motorist. You're playing Spell Queller in like the 3 slot, and then you have Metallic Rebukes sort of replacing Unlicensed Disintegration.
Yeah, so one of the key things of this deck is it's like a Metallic Rebuke Spell Queller deck that plays a little bit of interaction in the form of like maybe Cast Out or Stasis Snare. So here's the thing: is I think that this deck is closer to correct than something like Blue White Flash is, just because of the power level of things like Scrap Heap Scrounger and Toolcraft and things like that. But it gets a lot. It does the same thing that you kind of want to be doing in those decks, while also getting to play that Spell Queller game and the Avacyn game. Because I mean, what else would you want in the world, man? And like this deck beats. Here's the thing: Mardu has a bad Marvel matchup. This deck does not have a bad Marvel matchup. That's important.
Right. You're kind of doing the same things, except the Unlicensed Disintegrations, which are okay but not great in that matchup, are replaced with hard counterspells for Marvel. You also have a Cast Out, so if they try to slay on Marvel early, you can sometimes get them that way. You also just have a number of flyers. Flipping Avacyn can be pretty good in that matchup. Like, I think this deck does a good job of walking the line of applying pressure and being able to hold up interaction at the same time. Yeah. Like, compared to going a little more on the Blue-White Flash side, sometimes you can just run out of interaction before you really can actually close the door. And I think that playing like Toolcraft into Scrap Heap, you still get some of those kind of draws.
Right.
But if Unlicensed is a little bit worse than it has been, this is sort of a natural progression of that, I think.
Yeah, one thing that I will say here too, which is pretty important, is that I think that you still want to be the best Gideon deck that you can be, and right now, like if you are playing an Unlicensed Disintegration game, like you have those cards stranded in your hand where you don't have that problem with Spell Queller. You're able to really curve with this deck, which you have stopped being able to do with some of those Mardu lists. The other thing that I want to say is this deck actually did tie with Mono Black Zombie, so they actually had the same number. Yeah, so they actually had the same number of points, and they would come in at a tie here. The next deck that we have is a deck near and dear to your heart, and my heart is. I've streamed with this deck more than probably any deck in a while, and that's Green Red Energy. So there's 2 versions of this deck. There's the Monsters version, and then there's the Pummeler version. The Pummeler version put more into the top 8. The Green Red version put more into the Monsters version put more top 32s. Michael, what is going on here?
Well, this is like within a couple of cards of what I was advocating a couple of weeks ago, right? I guess they're playing Uncaged Fury over Larger Than Life.
Sure.
And they are playing, I can't remember what I was playing in the slots where their Ronuses are, but it's basically like, it's almost the same 75. It's actually kind of bizarre how close it is.
I think that I'm the only thing that I would change is I would still play that Harness Lightning over one of those Ronuses. I think that yeah, I think this deck is super reasonable right now.
It is. You have a really good Marvel matchup. It's just hard for them to interact with you and like along. Oh, and I was playing Fling, which
Oh, that's the other thing. That's the other thing that I was playing. I was playing 2 Flings as well.
I don't know.
So I think I was playing.
I don't know that Fling is actually better than Uncaged Fury. I enjoy Fling, but I might enjoy it more than it's great.
I think I was playing 1 less Long Tusk Cub, 1 less Uncaged Fury, 2 Flings, and then 1 less Ronus, 1 more Harness Lightning. And I think the deck's just reasonable. Like the numbers are kind of almost irrelevant to compare. To be fair, though,
right. You have about the core 55, right?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, though. I wouldn't shrug off Fling. That card has won me a lot of games in this deck. Like,
sure. All I really mean is I'd be willing to believe that Uncaged Fury is better. I haven't played enough with Uncaged Fury to tell you definitively that you should really be playing Fling and I'm great, right? I mean, it's just.
I played a lot with Uncaged Fury, and I can tell you it's not that great. And Fling has been pretty great.
Yeah, plus it's just sweet to kill people with Fling. Like,
yeah,
it's just better.
One of the things that I will say is I don't know if the benefits of like playing like a more mid-rangey game plan sometimes in the form of the monsters deck is better. I understand the want to like play Glorybringer main and like just play more Ronus and like that kind of game plan. Yeah, but I just think that like this package is good enough and you're gonna win some games.
Yeah, Pummeler just forces your opponent to have it like a lot. I would imagine Pummeler has to make your Marvel matchup better, basically single-handedly.
Yeah,
the card is just really hard for them to beat.
Yeah, and honestly, like, this deck probably of all of our decks has the best Marvel matchup out of any of them.
Yeah, I mean it's probably like 70-30, maybe better than that. From my, admittedly not gigantic sample size, but I very rarely was losing that matchup.
Yeah, they just don't have enough of it, so it's a huge benefit for this deck. Coming up next, we have Mardu Vehicles. I was a little surprised how high this deck was. It had a lot of top 32s.
Yeah, I think it has a lot of pilots and a lot of good pilots. I think this is the kind of deck where like it's just deceptively difficult to get the absolute most out of. And if you're great with it, I still see the appeal. Like,
sure.
Ultimately, like if you like the Esper Vehicles deck, you're still playing most of the same Magic cards.
I just think that this deck has the worst Marvel matchup of all of these decks.
And again, I think that that's true, but it's also mitigated by being very good with this deck.
Yeah, and also being a Gideon deck helps.
Right, knowing how to mulligan correctly, how to sideboard, what you do, play and draw, what hands you're looking to keep. Like, you get a lot of mileage out of a deck being familiar, I think. And this is a deck that the people who've been playing it have mostly been playing it for a long time at this point. They've mostly been playing basically the same list for months and months. And I get the appeal of that. Yeah,
absolutely. Man, this chat seems like so for those who are watching live, chat is going off about Mason getting super lucky. So shout out to Mason for winning a PPTQ recently with Mardu Vehicles. I would say that you would have to get pretty lucky to win an event with Mardu Vehicles, and Mason's probably a luck sack. That's all I'm saying. No. Mardu is pretty. I think that like here's the thing is like if you get to draw your Gideons and they don't draw their marbles, you're like a huge favorite still, even though the matchup is technically bad for you.
You mean like actually 100-0?
Well, I'm just saying like
if you draw Gideon, they don't. I mean, if Aetherworks Marvel doesn't draw Marvel, I don't know that it has any good matchups.
Well, you can mitigate it a few ways, but like I just think that. I think that being a good Gideon deck is like pretty important, and that's something that Mardu still has for it.
That Toolcraft, right? I mean, the Toolcrafts, the Scroungers, the Hearts, Gideon. I mean, we've all lost to that a ton of times. It's still really good.
Yeah, I completely agree. Coming up next, we do have Green Black Snake is what I would call this deck. Here's the thing: is universally. Whether you have a Delirium plan or a tokens plan or a counters plan, whatever your plan is right now, they're all of their plans include Snake at this point. The interactions are too powerful. And Rishkar is just too good. like it's just good. It's just super powerful, and like you're gonna win a lot of games doing that. So it doesn't matter which version of the deck you're playing, whether it's an Ishkana version, whether it's a Gearhulk version, whether it's a Nissa version. They're all in the vein of Snake. And honestly, I think this deck is good. I think that it solidified itself this week as one of the top 3 decks for sure.
Yeah. I think some vehicles variant is pretty playable. Marvel is obviously playable. This deck is playable. Every other deck is a little bit sketchy.
Yeah, which is so weird because like last week we were just singing the tunes of these control decks, but here's the thing: is that once you have green-black vehicles, Marvel, and zombies, that's when control has a hard time, right? It's like, well, at this point, like there's too many things attacking me to like build a reasonable control deck anymore.
Yeah, I think zombies probably had good matchups against this style of deck just because you couldn't sweep them and you don't really have that much stuff that tramples. But if zombies is less of a player due to people playing Chandras in Marvel and people still playing some Sweltering Suns and stuff like that, Sweltering Suns just isn't good against this deck. It doesn't kill like anything.
Yeah. I completely agree.
I mean, if you're playing like blue-red, this is not what you want to see. They have like Nissas, they have Dissenter's Deliverances for your Gearhulks, they have Grimflayer, Constrictor. Like it's just this is your nightmare.
Yeah, I will say that I do think that the blue based control decks can adjust by going closer to Jeskai, but in the current renditions where they're like these blue-red control decks, I just don't think you have a chance.
You're just being pulled in too many directions.
Exactly.
I think it's just really hard to sync up the removal spells.
You need a card like Fumigate to really
Fumigate and Cast Out, I think. You just need more versatile spells.
Yep. So there, if you're a Constructor Critic, there's a couple lists that I've posted. I know that some people have really enjoyed my take on Jeskai control recently, so you can check that out. But yeah, I think the green-black has really pushed the blue-red style decks out of the format. The number 1 deck that we have in our deck of the week is Marvel. So we're gonna just do the deck of the week segment for it, and kind of go into this a little bit. I think that Michael, we're gonna kind of switch roles from last week, and you're kind of gonna ask me about
absolutely.
it.
So I want to take. So the list that we have up is not the list that Brad Nelson played this week in GP Omaha. He basically is playing Censor and Dissenter's Deliverance in the main deck, along with the full 4 Glimmers, 2 Chandras, and then he's playing 4 Rogue Refiner, 4 Ulamog, 23 lands, and no Whirler Virtuosos in the 75.
Yeah.
And then he's sideboarding Ulvenwald Hydras and another Shrine. So you can go all the way up to 24 lands, which is a lot more than we've seen in this archetype before. So why do you think he made some of those changes? Do you think, like, what drove him in that direction?
So Whirler is an interesting one. So he is just saying that what I believe, which is that Whirler is not amazing in the mirror match. Like it is very good in your other matchups, but in the mirror match, it's not the card you want to be drawing. And he's saying, like, listen, I'm good enough to win my other matchups and just not worry about it with Whirler Virtuoso.
So what really happens then when you cut Whirler Virtuoso? What replaces it, and how does it affect your game plan in different matchups?
So one of the things that I think that it really does is it allows you to like have a one like. Okay, so this is kind of a ramp mindset. So when you have multiple things pulling at your resources, such as Whirler Virtuoso and Marvel, it makes you have to guess kind of where your lines are going to take you. And Whirler makes you really guess, right? Like you either have to manage your energy exactly at 6, 5, around that, where like if you have to look at your hand and decide things like that. Whereas if you don't play it in your deck, you get to not have to worry about that resource and have a more linear game plan, which really benefited Brad this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I thought his moving to 23 lands was pretty interesting. It looks like a lot of the other it looks like most of the other top 8 lists were, well, some were playing 23, some were playing 22, kind of an even split. But I also hadn't seen anyone playing Ulvenwald Hydra out of the board along with an additional shrine. I think that informs a lot about what his ideas about, like, what matchups do you think he's bringing in the Hydra specifically?
Yeah.
Like,
So
where is that good?
Yeah, so he's doing something a little bit different than what I've been doing, but in a similar vein. So for those who've been following me, I've been a huge advocate of Nistle's Renewal to really make it so you can easily cast your Ulamogs. So what he's saying is like he's saying like, I believe that the threat I'm so sorry of Ulamog is, or sorry, not of Ulamog, of Hydra is more powerful than the life of Nistle's Renewal. Well, and when I'm grabbing a Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, it ramps me in a similar manner to that Ulamog spot. And he's probably correct in a lot of different matchups. One of the things that he's also decided that you might notice is that, and this is different than the list on the screen, is that he's saying, I'm going to play a lot at instant speed in this deck and be a real control deck, through things like Dissenter's Deliverance, Censor, and Glimmer of Genius. Chad is actually correct. It was actually another point that I was going to bring up, which is that Nistle's Renewal can't be countered by Negate, which a lot of what the things that you're trying to do can be.
Or Ulvenwald Hydra, rather.
Or Ulvenwald Hydra. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't know that matters as much because of how easy it is to sequence in this deck because of the cost of your threats, but it means that when you Marvel, if they have Negate as their thing to like stop you between Chandra, Glimmer of Genius, that actually is kind of important.
That's cool. So I saw that. I also saw him playing it in the green-black matchup.
He was. And one of the reasons for that is because they're going to board out things like Never Return against you. Just making it so like most of the removal doesn't kill it. So they might keep in things like Grasp of Darkness to deal with your ramp creatures and your they have to worry about Warlord Virtuoso because that's a matchup where it matters. So because that they're keeping in these Grasp of Darknesses rather than those Never Returns, it really helps you in that matchup.
Yeah, I had wondered too if that was maybe a little bit of a nod to those decks sometimes slowing down and trying to get more disruptive. Like if they're trying to transgress you and dispossess your marvels and doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a threat density kind of thing.
Yes, too. That if you're sort of trying to zig when they zag, you can sometimes catch them where they'll keep a hand that makes a lot of sense against your Marvel plan, but is not really that good against your like Rogue Refiner into Glimmer, removal spell, Hydra, Ulamog type draw.
Yeah, one of the huge things that I think that Brad and I are on the same page about here is that you really want to be this tireless tracker threat dense deck in the post board games. So, whether that's boarding in Bristling Hydra Long Dusk Hub, which a lot of people do, or that's like, World Breakers or Sphinx of the Final Worlds, or in Brad's case, he's choosing Ulvenwald Hydra to really let him make his threats also elevate his game plan with the Ulamog plan that he already has. So it's kind of a thing of beauty and a thing that it's something to look at because this deck does a lot of what some of us were trying to do that aren't Brad Nelson because we're not as smart as Brad Nelson, obviously, while kind of elevating the things that really highlight the deck. Here's the thing: is that I told people for a long time it's not actually that hard to cast Ulamog in this deck. Like, you are a real control deck that can get to 10 mana and cast Ulamog, and if you play the right cards to make it easier for you, similar to you did, just with the inclusion of Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, it's just not that difficult.
I think that's true. I also think that moving back to a build with more cyclers sort of leads you in that direction. It increases the consistency of your deck in game one, where although Whirler Virtuoso is powerful, it's sort of a separate game plan.
Yes,
right.
It is.
Like it just does very different things than the rest of your deck. And going to like Dissenter's Deliverance kills Heart of Kiran, right? So that's cool. It kills Marvel in the Mirror, and it also cycles to help you find cards that are more central to your game plan if they're trying to disrupt you and you have time to do that. So
yeah, and just to be clear, even if you look at the list on the screen, it's still trying to do all of those things, right? As Nistle's Renewal, as Censors, as Gear Hulk, like it's clearly trying to play that control game in the same exact manner, just with different things. Also it sounds like the deck list on the screen is now Brad Nelson's deck. Sorry about that. But
Yeah.
but there are just different things that you can do to elevate your game plan, which is Ulamog. And honestly, like, Ulamog is just a power enough card that, like, you can build your deck around it. It's pretty easy.
So one of the cute things too is that Ulvenwald Hydra, like, it protects against both Dispossess and against Lost Legacy, right? In that it's kind of like a casual 10/10 a lot of the time.
The other thing that it does, which is pretty interesting, is one of the reasons that he can do this, and the reason he might have chose this, is that when you cut things like Whirler Virtuoso, you become more susceptible to flyers. So one of the things that he's doing here is he's like saying, like, all right, so I need a creature, I need something to combat these flyers, and having that card have reach is actually really important.
Yeah, my other guess is that the one of Lumbering Falls is very intentional. Being able to get another, like, hexproof threat is pretty cool. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know. So when I look at this deck, I see a really cohesive. It's just really cohesive. There's only really one game plan, because the ramping into Ulamog is sort of an extension of the Marvel plan, which is let's see a lot of cards. But
exactly.
It's really cool. Like, I think this list ties together a lot of the things that, like, when I've heard you talk about this deck sort of about this deck, meaning Marvel in general, like, this exact deck list goes further down the road on some of those ideas, and it's just really clean.
Yep. So it kind of speaks to, like, my core beliefs about this deck. This deck is inherently trying to get to a lot of mana or trying to cheese you out. So it's taking the space of those ramp decks that you might have seen in the past. So, naturally, because of that, like, your bridge spells don't get to be ramp spells because they don't exist. So what do you do instead? You have to disrupt your opponent and gain advantages in the energy facet of the game, which this deck does really well. And I think that there's multiple ways to build this. You can build your sideboard differently. You can build your main deck differently. But what he was doing was very clear as to what his identity is of this deck.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most important part, right? I don't even know that it's necessarily true that there's, like, one correct list, as much as it's important that your list goes with the cards in your list, right? That, like, your game plan is built with the cards in your 75 in mind. And that's what I really liked about this one. I
agree.
It was really clear to me what he wanted to have happen in different matchups. And, when you combine that with obviously being just great at Magic, it's no surprise that, he was able to win this event.
It must be nice to be Brad Nelson right now. Let's just say that.
He's just really good.
Yeah, like, he's just
really good.
He's a master. I do want to kind of touch on what you just said, though. It's so easy to, like, be like, okay, well, let's take this deck and like jam the best things of both worlds together. But what Brad did is he's like, no, that's not right. Like, I want a clear identity here. And I just did a deck that will be up later tonight or tomorrow on the green red Titan Shift deck and how I build it. And, like, the thing about these style of decks, and the thing that I love about them, is, like, the more linear you get, the more advantage you get about playing correctly. So one of the huge things that you get out of a deck like Marvel, a deck like Ramp, a deck, the deck, like, some of these style of decks, is, like, your sequencing becomes your sequencing and mulligans become your most important decisions, and you gain huge advantages from knowing exactly how you want to mulligan and how you want to sequence in certain matchups. So a lot of your advantage actually comes in play testing. So, like, knowing how your deck is built and how you're supposed to do that just gave Brad a huge advantage in that world, because he knew how he wanted mulligan, he knew what his deck was trying to do, and that is so important in a deck like this, and why Brad has in the past gravitated towards these green rampy style decks like this.
Yeah, I think just being able to assign yourself a clear role in every matchup,
right?
Like, this deck it's very intuitive when you look at this deck list to, like, look at it and just see, okay, so against this deck, this is my plan. Against this deck, this is my plan. And it's less like, if I draw a hand that looks like this is my plan. And I think that when you, like, a lot of people start including Servant of the Conduit in this style of deck, and it sort of splits you in this weird way where it's really hard to be a control deck playing Mana Dorks a lot of the time. and just having like more instant speed interaction maybe makes more sense if this is what you want your game plan to be.
Yeah, a huge question that I always get is like, Spencer, like, why don't you play Glimmer in your in your Marvel deck when they see my list? And I'm like, listen, like, here's the thing: is I want to pick a lane. Like, I either want to be this deck that's like playing Servant and trying to get ramp into Chandra and ramp into Ulamog that way, or I want to be this Glimmer of Genius deck that's like playing interactive spells and like playing this. I want a clear identity when I play a deck like this. Otherwise, I'm gonna get muddied and I'm gonna draw the wrong part of my deck. And that's one of the huge complaints that people have is like, well, I drew the wrong part of my deck. There's not a wrong part of your deck in this deck. The entire deck fits your same game plan.
Right. I think there's maybe I think you might still be able to play a small number of Glimmers with Servant just as sort of transgress protection or something, at least in
Sure.
sideboarded games. But I think the Censors and Dissenters Deliverances have huge tension with Servant. That makes total sense to me. That like you just want to play more lands, you want to cycle to hit your land drops, you want to like if you start adding servants, you become more vulnerable to spot removal, which actually does literally nothing against this deck. This deck has 0 creatures in game 1 that you remotely care about an opponent killing. That's really powerful.
Right, and turning on your opponent's Harness Lightnings with Servant is like pretty scary. So that is it for the deck of the week this week. Marvel, clearly the best deck. I do want to say that this deck had a significant decrease in the number of points from the last weekend, the last standard weekend. So while people were like very focused on the top 32, if they had actually focused in on its this week versus its last time, it actually had a huge drop off. I think it had like what 139
It was like
points.
130 to like 70, right?
Yeah,
It lost like almost half of its share.
Huge decrease in its share of the format. But what it's looking at is its share of the format overall. It had an insanely dominant weekend 2 weekends ago. Like insane.
Now it merely is sitting in about the space that the best deck generally is.
Right. This is less dominant than green white, less dominant than Abzan, less dominant than
everything is less dominant than green white. That deck literally won like every
People don't realize that. People forget that.
Insane.
People don't realize like it was the best deck by a huge margin. Like it would get like 117 points and the next deck would have like 10.
Yeah, that deck was like so much better that you basically couldn't justify playing Magic if you weren't playing it. That deck was insane. Yeah.
Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is our training grounds. We want to talk about something every week that gets you better at Magic or life in general. Let's talk about improving at your own pace. And everybody on the show contributed to this week's training grounds. So I worked a 20-hour week day yesterday. I was late to get the show ready, and Michael and Mason really helped out. So I want to thank you guys for contributing to this week's training grounds. And I want to talk about like this. I picked this training grounds because of some of our patrons who are who I've talked to recently, and like this is something that I think is really important to understand. Like improving at your own pace versus other people or your expectations is really important. Like you have to manage your expectations of yourself and you have to manage your expectations of you versus others because you're not the same person as another person. And I want to start by talking about Magic in general and understanding that Magic is a weird commitment. Like it's different than probably anything else you'll do in your life. Between time, energy, and a learning curve, it's pretty different.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like, it's funny. You can improve a lot in short periods of time, and then you'll kind of plateau off and feel like you're sort of aimlessly just playing to play. And then you'll sort of figure something out again, and things will click for you, and then you'll feel like you're running hot for a little while. You'll do some like it kind of comes and goes sometimes. Even for really good players, I mean, even pros experience stuff like that, where like, I know what Brad Nelson was player of the year and then barely got silver the next year or something. And it's very up and down.
PV had 2 years in a row where he got silver twice. And then he just went on this tear top 8ing a pro tour, every year for, multiple years, multiple pro tours in 1 year. And it's like, it's this thing where it's hard. Like Magic is hard. Magic is hard. And like, it's so easy to get caught in some of the traps that Magic offers that other games don't offer.
It's so true. It's so true. It has a really steep learning curve, but it has an oddly steep learning curve in that it's steep, and then I think it gets shallower for a little while, and then it just like almost goes straight up a cliff wall.
Yeah.
Right, where you're literally like you're scrapping and climbing and trying to dig in to not get worse.
Yeah, one of the huge things that I think about here is the time and energy aspect. This is true in a lot of levels. So PV is a good example of this. He actually came on our podcast and talked about the difference between his silver years and getting back to platinum. And he's like, I started thinking that it was about luck. Like I gave up basically is what he said. He was just like, listen, like I made back deck choices because of my mindset. I didn't dedicate the time because of my mindset. I didn't dedicate the energy because of my mindset. So what happens is we start getting a little unlucky and we see like, well, is it worth the time and energy that I was putting in just a minute ago? And then your mindset changes, your deck choices change. There's this holistic view of Magic that you have to have all of the time. And having a holistic view all the time is really hard.
Definitely. I think just trying to separate, one of the hardest things I think for everyone is separating play from results, right? Like how you're actually playing from what the results say about how you're playing.
Yeah.
And especially at high levels, the edges are so razor thin that I think it can be really brutal. And in combination with burnout, I can see how you could end up there.
Yeah. Then the next thing that we have here is not comparing yourself to others. This is really important. So like, learning without comparing is something that was written down here. So like, this is kind of your thought, Michael, is like.
Yeah. So what I was trying to do is like, I was thinking about, so when we're trying to grow, it's like looking internally rather than externally. But as I thought about it more, that isn't quite what I want. I want the ability to pick the brain of the people around me, talk to them, learn from them, without comparing how I'm improving to how they're improving, because it's just you don't want to isolate yourself. I don't think like walling yourself off and not allowing yourself to, be happy for the people around you or see how other people are doing, talk to your friends. That's not what you're going for, right? But understanding that like you can learn from them, but kind of results will come when they come, and you have to put the focus on continuing to learn things, rather than sort of, well, I did this and you did that and Austin did this, and like,
right.
It just doesn't work like that.
It's a huge trap. So I'll just say my opinion. So like, since we started our testing team, the people in my opinion that have improved the most are Michael Hinderocker, Chris Hansen, Austin Geltz, and West Singleton. And like, Chris literally has never won a PPTQ, and he's still improved more than probably most of the people on the team. Like, and that's the thing is he can separate that result. He top eights like every PPTQ he plays in. Like,
yeah, just
like the dude is
time,
just
right?
solid at Magic now. And like before he joined the testing team, he was like playing these brews and like having trouble making it. And like he like his results do matter somewhat. But like the fact is like he's making better deck choices, he's making better plays, he can articulate his plays. The dude has just improved at Magic the Gathering. He's just better than he was 6 months ago. And like, or 8 months ago, or 10 months ago. And like Austin and West are just hugely better, just massively better. Like, and like you as a player, Michael, like you were really good, you were really talented, and like now, like somebody gives you an idea and you just can run with it and like completely do like the thing that you need to do and understand that idea and internalize it and do these things that like you couldn't have done when we started. And it is like, the thing is that it's important that if I'm Chris and I haven't won a PPTQ, to not be like, well, I feel better than so-and-so on our testing team. Why am I not winning? That's not the question you need to be answering yourself. It's not why have they won and I haven't. It's why haven't I? They're just different things.
Yeah, and I think too, like if you look at the feelings that those two statements create, like one is reflective and one is like reflexive, right? One is like you're being defensive when you're like, oh, I think I'm better than this person, but they are doing better than me results wise. So it's just not like a very productive line of thought to go down. I just really don't think you get anything out of like trying to justify to yourself why things aren't working out. It's like if you're just more if you are more willing to like accept the results for what they are and then try to figure out just why what's happening is happening for whatever reason. It doesn't like that you can literally come to the conclusion and be correct that you've been moderately unlucky. Like that's an okay conclusion. That's a fine conclusion to come to as long as you're doing it through being honest with yourself and reflecting on your plays and how you're preparing. And I mean, you might like I know Matt for a while, right, had like lost a ton of PPTQ finals in a row, but like 2/3 of them were to Quentin. Right. Like it was like, well, yeah, you keep losing the finals because you keep like every time you make the finals, you're playing against someone else who's really good. It's like, my solution to this problem would mostly be play against worse players in the finals. Right.
Yeah,
like it's not necessarily a reflection of you all the time. And just like understanding that there can be things outside of your control, but you don't have to make it about comparison all the time. It's just how do I work to get better?
I had two separate conversations. So I was struggling with this a little bit earlier this year, a little bit out of jealousy. And like I had talked to you and I had talked to Danny and I'd been like, man, like I really wish I was good enough to hit silver. And both you and Danny separately were like, well, go play in 13 GPs and you'll probably hit silver, Spencer. Like you both said that. And it's like it's this thing where it's like, oh, like why do I think what I think? And like, am I being unfair to myself to think that like at what I'm doing in Magic should get me silver just like it's getting Michael silver? Obviously not. Like I play in 1 GP a year. Like it's unrealistic of me to be like silver's my goal. Like by the way, silver's not my goal. I'm using this as an example. I'm not saying that this has actually happened. We did have the conversation. That's a fact. But what I'm saying is like it would be unfair of me to be like, well, I'm almost as good as Magic as Michael. Like, why can't I hit silver? And then go play in 2 GPs and be like, well, I didn't hit silver. Like, obviously Magic is stupid and like
I didn't win both of them. Oh, like, it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
That would be a ridiculous expectation, right? Where like Michael and Danny are like, no, we want to hit silver this year. We're going to actively go and do what we can. So our situations are completely different, and it would be unfair of me to compare myself to Michael. It would be completely unfair, and I would not be happy with whatever the result was unless I got extremely unlucky and won 2 GPs. Which
I mean, yeah, that'd be good,
but
unlikely, right? Like if that's actually your expectation,
right,
you're setting yourself up for massive disappointment, obviously.
Yep. And what's important here is like we have different challenges and different needs as Magic players, right? So like my goal was not to hit silver going into this year. So like if as much as our listeners that don't like me and don't like Casey or don't like some of our co-hosts like to compare us, we are not the same person and we can't compare ourselves to each other. It would be completely unreasonable for me to be like, well, I think I'm almost as good as Michael, so I better do as good as him at tournaments and do as like and get as many pro points and like it's just not the same thing. And the same thing can be true of you and your friend at whatever you're trying to do, right?
It's just a silly thing anyways though, because it ties up your feelings about yourself in the results
and the results of others,
right? Where now you're like now you're not just going like your play to the variance of your play. Now you're like your play to the variance of your play to their play to the variance of their, right? Like you're like doubling on the kind of variance part of it where you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, I remember a time where like a person that this is something that happened to me a couple of times where like people that in the old PTQ system, people that I thought were worse than me in Magic were like winning PTQs, and I top eighted a bunch and I lost in the finals and like I taken 9th a bunch of times. I'm like, why are these people winning PTQs and I can't win one? Like this is so unfair. And it's like, what the F are you talking about? Like they are a completely different person than you and like.
Well, and ultimately the answer is because they once won an 8-man that you didn't win. Right? Like if you're also able to like it, you just have to recognize where kind of the line of insanity is there and pull yourself back. And it's natural to do that. Like it's very hard to completely control that impulse, right? Like everyone does that, but if you can recognize when you're sort of like going down this path, like towards the kind of thoughts that just aren't productive, they don't help. It doesn't help you get better or drive yourself crazy that someone you think is worse than you like did better than you at some event, right?
Yeah.
That's just a nonsense thing to think.
And I think that like you can look at this in a few different ways. Like, we can use like as a human being, right? Like I have a full-time job that I literally just had a 20-hour workday yesterday, and I have a child that like woke me up at 4 a.m. after my 20-hour workday. Like I have just different challenges than other people on my team. It would be so weird to be like, well, so like let's pretend that 20-hour workday and that 4 a.m. thing happened to me, right? And then Matt and I both go play in a PPTQ. I go 0-2 and Matt wins. Like it would be like ridiculous to be like, well, I think I'm better at Magic than Matt. I should have won that event. I don't know why he won and I didn't. I had a completely different situation and completely different challenge than him. And I actually don't even know what Matt's challenges or Matt's situation is. Like you can't think that way. Instead, what you have to do is sit there and be like, should I have played in this PPTQ after a 20-hour workday and my kid waking me up at 4 a.m.? Did I actually give myself the best chance to win that event, regardless of who won the event, regardless of what my friends did, regardless of what my teammates did? It was like, it's ridiculous. Like, you just can't think that way.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that.
And this kind of brings us to our next point, which is like goals. And I kind of touched on this a little bit, but your goals and your friends' goals may be similar, and these people that you're testing with, but they don't have to be the same. And like this, Michael and I had this conversation about silver a while back. I don't even remember what Michael, where I was like, man, I just don't know that I'd ever be good enough to get silver. And Michael was like, well, have you tried? Like, have you played in like a bunch of GPs in a year? I was like, no, I think the most GPs I played in a year is 3. And you're like, oh,
yeah,
well, like
it's pretty tough with 3. You're probably gonna have to qualify for like at
all
least
of the
3 pro tours in a year if
Yeah.
you only play 3 GPs. Like
yeah.
bare minimum, and you're probably gonna have to do pretty well at most of the pro tours. Like it's a big ask, right?
Right.
Like
So the thought here is like, all right, Spencer, how many GPs are you gonna play in this year? Is it a reasonable goal of yours to say, like, can I hit silver or gold? No, it's not. And it's not fair for me to compare myself to Michael or Danny or Alex or any other person that's like willing to put in the time and energy to like achieve their goal, which was that, right? And the same thing can be true of like you and your friend, right? Your friend's goal is to qualify for every single RPTQ, and he plays in every single PPTQ, and you play in 3 PPTQs, and you have the same goal. Is that fair?
It's going to be tough. I mean, it's not like your goal is impossible, but it's going to be really tough, right? Just like if you want to play 3 GPs a year and still get silver, it's not impossible. It's something you could do.
Right.
It's just that you've set a really tough goal. It's a lot like, it's a lot like someone who's going to play in more saying they want to be platinum, right? Like, yeah, you can. Things just have to go really well.
Right. And it's important to be reasonable here, right? Like, I'm gonna tell you an unreasonable goal. It is an unreasonable goal to win every single FNM you play in. That is not a fair goal. FNM may be pretty easy for you, but it is still an unreasonable goal. You have to like look at yourself and be like, what are my goals and are they reasonable? Like,
well, and even more than that, why is that an unreasonable goal? I would say largely it's an unreasonable goal, not because it's like overly ambitious or it's unfair to people, but like it's just actually not under your control.
Right.
That's just not the kind of goal that you have control over. It's like asking to win. It would be like asking to qualify for 4 pro tours in a year via RPTQ. Like ultimately you're going to have to win 4, one of matches, right? Like you just don't have that kind of control.
I mean,
right?
More than that, right? You have to technically win 4 PPTQs and top 4.
Well, sure, but you actually have a lot of control over winning 4 PPTQs. You have a lot of control over that. You actually have a lot more control over top 4ing an RPTQ because you can prepare for that event. But ultimately, if we're saying I'm going to win every FNM, so I have to 4-0 every single FNM, it's going like I'm going to be playing one match for that over and over and over again. And if it's like a pass fail where you have to get 100% of a one match sample size over and over and over, like that's just not a goal you actually have control over. Like if you're looking at making goals, it makes way more sense to make a goal like, I want to prepare for an event like this. I want to, like, results-based goals. They sound good and they feel good when they happen, but it's a really tough way to actually build. It's so much easier to focus on improvement, set goals related to improvement, to playing more or to working hard, like goals over things you have complete control over, because those goals, it's much easier to tell if they're reasonable or not. You look at them and you're like, well, I can't play 5 hours of Magic a day, so I probably shouldn't set a goal of playing 5 hours of Magic a day.
Right.
No, right? It's just very obvious immediately.
Exactly. This actually brings us to our next point is like, I put lose the rot, win the pot. So I honestly, it's because, don't be Roddy, be potty sounded stupid. So, but like, you're a child.
I enjoy it. Yeah.
You're a child. So I shouldn't have said anything. So what I have a few thoughts here, and one of them is like, don't get caught up in an individual event. Like, we kind of talked about this during my Always Improving moment, but it's like, it's important to note that, like, I played well during that RPTQ. I built my seal pool correctly. I had other people review it. Like, they're like, yeah, you built your deck correctly. Like, good job. Like, I think that you, Matt, and another person were like, yeah, I wouldn't change a single card.
Yeah,
in your seal pool.
It's just, it was a perfectly reasonable deck to build. When I was watching you, you played well. Like, yeah,
and
you control what you can control. Yes, exactly.
I prepared for the event. I built my seal pool correctly. I played well during the event. That's all I can do. At that point, it's like, okay, like, there's nothing else you can do. And if you're going to sit there and get upset about that, like, what are you playing? Like, you're just playing the wrong game. And
it's probably take up chess.
It's important to realize that. And it's like the number of people that are like, we had a player in Utah a while back who did a bunch of preparation for an SEG. He ended up playing like this Bant Sphinx Revelation deck at the tournament. And he's like, Sphinx for 5, draw 5 lands. Sphinx for 7, draw 7 lands. Sphinx for 5, draw 5 lands at this event. And he's like, well, I quit Magic. I'm done. I'm never playing Magic again. I'm like, well, I don't know why that was a thing that, like, that I don't know why you were playing Magic.
What you literally know as you cast that it's not a high chance, but there's some percentage chance that, know.
And it's like, if like all of your self-worth and all of your time put into Magic was about this one SCG event, obviously you're going to be upset at the end of that SCG event if you literally don't win it.
Right, which is a lot to ask. And I think ultimately, like, if you're putting the focus on the process, putting the focus on how can I prepare better, what am I doing, like, why did this event go well or poorly, were my plays good, like that kind of stuff, you just have a lot more chance to come out of it like feeling like you have control over your own feelings.
Yeah.
Right. That like you can be happy and satisfied because you played the best you could. Just like if I had lost, I still would have been happy with the sealed deck I built. I still would have been happy with the deck I drafted. It doesn't,
right.
The whether or not I won one game, like whether or not I win that game 3 with a draft deck, like doesn't change the fact that I was pretty happy with the draft.
Right. And that's what's important here is like you have to look at your process and what you're doing to improve when you're looking at your own improving at your own pace, right? Like it's not about what he did to improve, like you're a different person and like your process is important. Like you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's like, all right, I'm going to play 5 hours Magic a day. It's like, okay, well, like you only actually have an hour. So like you're putting, first of all, an unrealistic expectation on yourself. Your process is going to be incorrect because you're like, your process is built upon you playing 5 hours of Magic a day. You're not going to be able to do that. Like you have to, there's this holistic approach to Magic that you have to take when you're trying to improve at like this level. And also, like, is that the holistic approach you're taking? Are you actually taking that approach? Because if you're not, and like you don't have time to take that approach, like you're not going to improve at the rate of the person that is doing that. And that's really important. And like your process and what you're doing is so much more important than like how it ends up at like some given tournament.
Yeah, you just don't have that level of control. You just really don't. It's like I don't know. There's just so much that can go wrong. I mean, in Magic, but like you might spend all this time preparing for a tournament and then not even be able to play. Like you just don't know. And I think like tying up your self-worth in a result or a couple of results or even a lot of results is just it's a good way to become unhappy.
So one of the things that you put down here is like care more about learning than just quote being good. What does that mean?
So I think of it this way, right? Like so you're playing someone who's better than you, right? And you're like, oh man, I wish I was as good as him or her. And you're like, oh well, someday I'm going to be good. But like part of being good, I think, is mostly realizing that you're like not that good.
Sure.
Right? That like you decide at some point that like being good is about results, right? No one's going to be like, oh, that guy's great, he's just never won anything ever. Right? That's not a statement we usually hear.
Right.
But if we put the focus on continuing to improve ourselves, like we can eventually when we're good, we're not going to backslide. When we get to whatever we had decided was good, we're not going to backslide because we're still looking for ways to improve. We're going to remain engaged because the game is not about the result. It's about like learning more, making the right plays, understanding why things are happening, testing better, all these little things that you actually do have control over. And when you're looking at like the process of learning rather than the result being good, I just think there's so much more space for fulfillment and like ability to continue to grow over a long period of time.
I completely agree. I think the next point actually just really touches what you said, and I think that we've kind of advocated for this, but never really talked about it. And that's like taking note of actual improvements. So this is something that you and I have mentioned a few times on the podcast. Is like taking a moment to realize like I might not have won that game 3 months ago.
Yeah, and or you wouldn't have seen why you lost it 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Can be just as important. Like I think one of the things that I really see a lot of the time and that I know is really easy to slip into this trap is like getting caught up in when I win, it's just like, oh, well, I won, so it's okay. And when I lose, being despondent about it because it's like, well, whatever I did, it wasn't good enough. But I think a lot of the time, even when you're like playing sloppy and you win, you can still like I'm more interested in how I played than what the result was. I can be really proud of a loss because I think I played it really well, and I can be really unhappy with a win if I think that I didn't deserve it.
Yeah, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there with like sometimes you're gonna make a play and be like, oh, that was the wrong play, but like, did you know that was the wrong play, a while ago? And how do you respond to that is really important, because if you don't notice the improvements that you're making, you're going to feel stagnated, and that's going to be way more frustrating. You're going to be like, well, I'm not improving. Like, why am I dedicating all this time? It's like, you are improving. Like, the fact that you feel like you're not improving, that like is either based upon the wrong thing, being that you're basing upon results, or you're not noticing like the important parts. Like there's going to be so many times that there's swings in Magic. I think of it this way, and people hate it when we do sports comparisons. Think about it if a team went on a 6-0 run on you in basketball, making 3 shots, and like you had good defense on all 3 shots. You're like, well, I'm never gonna win this game. I had good defense on all 3 of the shots. I give up. You're never gonna win that basketball game. There are runs. There are gonna be runs in basketball where like they're like, especially like at the NBA and college, where like everybody's good. So like sometimes you're gonna have a hand in their face and they're gonna just sink that shot. And like you did the right thing. You put the hand in their face. Like there's nothing else you could have done.
And that happens a lot when you're playing Magic at like a pretty high level, right? You just play against someone and they're like, you represent what you have to represent to give yourself a chance for them to like, fall for a bluff or whatever, and they just shrug it off. And ultimately you're like, well, does that make you bad because you lost, or good because you tried to find a way to give yourself a chance? And I think if you can put the focus on like playing better, on giving yourself a chance, playing to your outs, sequencing correctly, all that kind of stuff, doing all the little things right, you'd be pretty surprised at, in the end, what good Magic you can play. Like if you're mulliganing correctly and sequencing correctly, and you can evaluate what your opponent has, you'll lose a game sometimes and still be like, oh well, I whatever. I don't know what I really could have done there, right? And it's kind of a liberating feeling when you lose and are just find yourself still feeling at peace with it.
What if you were to wrap this episode up? What would you say? Like, how would you wrap it up on a bow? With a bow?
I would just basically say that like your goal should be to improve and to find the best ways for you to improve yourself, how you interact with the people around you, encourage them to improve as well, and just make sure that you are moving forward but still enjoying yourself.
Awesome. That is perfect. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say on the subject. I really enjoyed this topic, and I hope that it's helpful for some people. So you can support this podcast by going to patreon.com/ccmdg to become a patron of the show. The current goal is to actually pay Michael and Danny and Mason. So at $500 per month, we can start to do some things differently. I might change this up. I think that the real value comes from getting me, Michael, Danny to GPs, and also paying Mason a little bit. So I might change this up, like make this like, at what point can like we attend GPs and like get them paid for, and like from that create better and more content. So we'll be looking.
Yeah, I think that's the hope, right? That like that we can improve types and hopefully quality of content.
Yeah.
Through more opportunities to become better Magic players.
Yep. So becoming a patron at patreon.com/ccmdg, we're getting to the point where like we're getting close to where like where the podcast can pay for us to go to events and turn those events into opportunities, and that's pretty important. So patreon.com/ccmtg. We appreciate everything that we've gotten. If every person listening just donated $1 more per month, it would be over. Like that would be our full-time jobs, and it would be really fun for us. So thank you everybody who is supporting, and we look forward to more support in the future. And also in the chat, game was spelled incorrectly. That's game is GAM. Where can people find you, Michael?
You can find me on Facebook. My name is Michael Hinterhucker. You can also find me on Twitter at MagicMikeMTG.
You can find me on Twitter at SpencerH. You can find me on Facebook at Spencer Stephen Howland. You can find the podcast every week on mtgcast.com, constructorcriticism.com. There's so many places now, as well as YouTube, live on ccmdg.twitch TV, all of the podcasting apps you could possibly find, and the Mana Base. So thank you so much to our sponsor at the Mana Base and our sponsor at Oasis Games. We really appreciate it. For all of your single needs, please check out Oasis Games, and for all of your sealed product needs, go to the sponsor of the Mana Base at Fusion Gaming. So you can join that conversation by joining the Facebook group at Constructed Criticism Family, and you can join the Discord channel. All of that information is in the show notes and the information page, and it's pretty great. And chat is also just saying how awesome Oasis Games is. So if like you don't have to agree with us. Like people just use the website and just love it. So they ship quickly. They're the best, and so we really appreciate their sponsorship. You can tweet at us with hashtag would that be good. Hashtag would that be good is our Twitter outreach program. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, and we want to be doing everything we can to be doing what we can to improve with you.
I think we mixed up our
no. Twitter. I did not mix it up.
You're getting there? Okay.
I was getting there.
All right.
And I was going to say, so if you tweet it, we'll read it. Jerk.
It's the most important line.
It's the only one you care about.
Sounds good, doesn't it? It just sounds good, doesn't it?
It's the only one you care about.
That's great.
Maybe I messed up. I don't know. I'm tired.
I understand. 20 hours is a long day.
Dude, it was so long. Let's start this. Should we go?
Yeah, we have Dylan Hafner saying, at CCMTG, my PPTQ sealed pool has one Liliana Death's Majesty and one Gideon of the Trials. Hashtag would that be good? I mean, probably.
Sure, if you get to play white-black, like, it seems pretty powerful.
Yeah.
We had a long discussion at the RPTQ about Gideon, and, like, Michael compared it to Oblivion Ring, and I was like, Well, that's unfair. Like,
I
it's a
mean,
lot
so
better
so
than
it's better than that. I mostly was just saying I don't think it's like an insane bomb. I think
Sure.
it's good. I think Liliana is an insane bomb.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah.
There was
that's
a
all.
game that we got to watch where uh,
What was it? There was like the guy had
sorry,
a
so
glory
the guy
bringer?
had 3 creatures in play, including a glory bringer that was exerted. Uh, his opponent top decks a austere command, uh,
Yeah, invocation.
and casts it, and like wipes his board. He has no cards in hand. Like he like draws, plays Liliana, gets back Glorybringer, puts it into play and attack. It's like, I don't know what you could have done.
Yeah. Shuffled his deck better, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Whirl of
That's about
Intervention into Marvel into spin hit Ulamog while the control player is tapped out for Glimmer. My understanding is this is a long conversation about a dagger. And then the response is just throwing out there, it was with Spencer's Jeskai list. Yeah. What happened? I'm so confused.
I think Mason got Andrew pretty good. That's my understanding. I don't know that I really want to play War of Invention in Marvel, but I really like the idea of, they're like Torrential Gearhulk, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna respond with Aetherworks Marvel, activate Ulamog.
So this next one is probably the highlight of Magic this week. If you're not following this is pretty important. So PV tweets at the best restaurant in the world at Olive Garden #sponsored, in quotations, I wish, frowny face. And then Olive Garden responded and said, "Game on, Paulo. We'd love to connect with you. Send us a DM and we can get some goodies over to you." What is happening? Are we getting a #spons for the best player in the world from Olive Garden?
I hope they make him wear a chef's hat.
Oh man,
I want to see some. I want to see some gnarly tournament sponsorships. I want to see Paulo at like a PT wearing an apron and like a baker's hat. That's my dream.
I had Olive Garden this week, and I'm gonna say this because people are like talk a lot of crap on Olive Garden. Actually, I think it's super underrated. Like it's like people basically say it's bad. That's just not true. It's actually just good food all the time. I don't know that I've ever had like a bad meal at an Olive Garden. Like I've had bad meals at like Applebee's and Chili's, and like Olive Garden's always super solid.
I'm just not going to comment.
Won a PPTQ and then watched the Leftovers HBO series. Now I'm watching Bachelor at ABC. #oh that'd be good. #great 3 days. The PPTQ is great, Mason. I haven't watched the Leftovers, but I've heard good things. And I have not watched Bachelorette very much this season, so I don't know if that's good.
I couldn't tell you either.
Tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern with the new CCMTG #, would it be good? Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. So, wishes do come true. At Corinne Oli will be on Bachelor in Paradise. #make America Corinne again. #would it be good? I just want to say, as much as I don't enjoy Bachelorette, I really, really enjoy Bachelor in Paradise. And Corinne is literally Michael's favorite Bachelorette contestant.
But the question is whether or not her nanny will also be on Bachelor in Paradise, because I don't know that Corinne will make it otherwise.
Are you going to watch this just to watch her?
No, probably not. I mean, if I'm just being honest, the answer is like actually 0%.
Actually, no.
Yeah.
At Spencer13H, do you think you'll be at GP Portland this year? I'm flying over from New Zealand. #would that be good? 1, yes, that would be good if you went to Portland because it's the best city in America. 2, it is very likely that the podcast will pay for me and Michael to go to Portland at this point.
Yeah, so. I mean, whether or not that part happens, we'll probably both be there anyways. So,
like I have a car, and Michael will probably be willing to drive with me, so we'll probably go.
Yeah. I mean, like, it'll happen somehow.
So I didn't realize it was in November when I responded to the tweet. I think Michael and I will definitely be there. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for listening this week. Michael, what did you learn?
Well, I learned a lot about. I learned why Brad Nelson is a master because his deck is great, and he's great. But I also learned that I shouldn't be discouraged that I'm not as good as Brad Nelson.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I learned this week is like it's really important for me to realize where I'm at and then adjust my thinking accordingly. Otherwise, it's just really easy to get frustrated, and I just don't want to be frustrated. The other thing that I learned is Chloe Bound Initiate might be like the real deal.
Yeah, it's kind of sneaky good, right?
Yeah.
Like I bet that card is great in modern. Like I'm imagining that card against burn, right? And you probably like aren't exerting it on turn 3 or whatever. But it's probably just dying to a burn spell like every time. But imagine you like draw that in the mid-late game when you're at like 6 life and they're needing to draw like burn spell, and you're like, oh, gain 4.
Yeah, I want to be clear to chat. I do not have a low sample size of Olive Garden. It is my wife's second favorite restaurant. I go a lot. I've literally have never had a bad meal. If you have a bad meal at Olive Garden, you have unrealistic expectations of Olive Garden, and you should.
You need to set new goals. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you guys all next week.
See ya.